Silverstone Hamster had 4 babies. Awaiting this.
I talked to a couple of people from this funny school you have here, and they gave me a list of things to talk about. And I think I have an hour. So
Got me as long as
I have a set of notes here that I've used over the last 4 or 5 years when I go to different places and talk about this program. So it's a little bit changed because I feel like I'm home again, but take it as if I'm talking about someplace else for a while. First of all, my name is Bob Whitlow, and I for the last year and this year teach full-time at the Lawrence Hall of Science in a program called Equals, which is dedicated to changing the way math education is taught so that girls and minorities will succeed where they had failed in the past. But for the 16 or 17 years before that, I spent my whole educational career teaching in the Charquin program, which is a public school within a school located in Hayward, California, that some of you may be familiar with. And when I say that at workshops, people go, what? Wait a minute. Tell me about that again. I do a lot of workshops for teachers, and teachers hear my introduction that I teach in a self-contained kindergarten through 6th grade, parent cooperative, public school, and they simply can't comprehend that. So I don't get breaks and I don't get a lunch because they always want to know what I'm talking about. And almost always they say, not always, but often certain teachers say, wow, most teachers say, I really wish I could be part of something like that. These are teachers who take it upon themselves to go to workshops to improve their skills as an educator. So they are genuinely and generally excited about the profession. Unfortunately, there's a lot of teachers that think of it as a job. But I'm not one of those, because back in the late 60s and early 70s, there were things that were happening in the world, in the United States and California, that were probably, were definitely more intense, at least on the surface, than they are now. And one of those things was the Vietnam War. And a lot of people, seemed to be a lot more overtly polarized. Now, and the reason I keep saying things like that is because I think things are just as bad, if not worse now, but the powers that are in control have disguised them rather well. But they weren't as experienced at disguising them then. So that there were a lot of people that really had a strong feeling about government and about control. So there were some, and other things too, the environment. There were a bunch of parents that were involved in the Hayward co-op nursery program. They got together and found strength in numbers and decided they did not want to turn their 5-year-olds over to the system. And the system was definitely in capital letters back then, and should still be seen that way. And so they got to talking about what they could do instead. These people at that time were reading one of the books that was really popular at that time was this book, Summerhill, which is the first book on education I ever read. When I first moved up to Northern California, I was living on a ranch, building a ranch house, and living in the trees, still trying to be a hippie. And I read this book, and it sort of changed my attitude about the profession that my parents said was for people that flunked out of graduate school. And a lot of the parents that founded this program felt that this was one of their Bibles. And I would encourage anybody to read it that wants to, because it's just as valid now as it was then. It's about the British infant school system that really became popular after World War II. The other thing that the people that founded this program did a lot was read books about Native Americans. There was a political attitude, and there was a spiritual attitude about the people that started this program. And one of the things that they always insisted upon at meetings at school or at night was that everybody sit in a circle, and that was called a powwow. And a power was taken very seriously because it meant a lot of things. A circle means a lot of things. Not the least of which is that it represents family. And hopefully, the beginning of this explanation of what Charquin is and the end of it will begin with family and end with family because that's what the circle of Charquin is supposed to be about. They chose the name Charquin because Charquin was a Native American who had been enslaved on a mission in San Francisco and did not take to it well, so he led some people away from it, and for the rest of his career was basically a bandit that attacked the mission whenever he felt like it and caused a lot of trouble. And the parents that put this program together were studying a lot of them were studying Native Americans at the time, and they thought that was a great idea, so that's what they called it. And it's Charquin, not Charquin, but it's been anglicized, unfortunately. I don't think we spread the origin of the word Charquin around too much, but that was the idea. So in the very beginning, these parents in '71 went to the school board and said, we want to do this thing, and the school board said, and so they went back and they came to the school board in '72 and they said the same thing over again. They tried for about 2 years, continually rewriting and lobbying the board. At that time, there were lots of empty classrooms in the Hayward School District, and the superintendent, Arbison, was, why not? So he said, okay, you can do this thing. It was very loose. I have in one of my folders here what the notes from the meeting looked like at the school board, where they said, yeah, go ahead, do it. One of the concerns they had was about parents teaching in the classroom. They also were very concerned about cultural ethnic balance in the program. That has been a concern from the school board from the very beginning. So they said, not only, one of the things that was very important about saying, yeah, you parents can have this program that you want, but you can also hire the teacher that you want. And the teacher they hired was Celestine Randall, who is now Celestine Villa. It's her maiden name. She was the teacher of the co-op nursery school here in Baltimore. So Celestine was the teacher, and they had mostly kindergarten, first grade kids, and some second graders and one third grader, because they'd been trying for a couple of years to start this program, so the kids had. Now I've talked to other people and gone and talked to superintendents in other districts, to groups of people who've tried to do the same thing, and usually those programs fall apart, those groups of people fall apart because the superintendents will drag their heels for at least a year. Those kids get spread to different kindergartens around the district, and the movement falls apart. The people that started this program, for whatever reason, whatever you want to think, however you want to think about it, managed to have the kind of energy and togetherness to keep it going, and so they got this program going. And the first year there were about 30 kids. And the second year, they had a lot more kids that wanted to come in, and so they hired another teacher, which was me, and they were looking for a particular kind of individual, and they picked me. And I don't know if they got what they wanted, but I know that there were 9 parents on the panel and 1 administrator, and the administrator said nothing except that he didn't like my shoes. That was it. And the last question that the parents on the panel asked me is, "What's your sign?" And I was a rookie. I had not gotten along real well in getting my credential program, so I was sort of looking for a situation like this. And I think we met pretty well. And so the second year that Charquin was in operation was '74, and we had about 44 kids, and the district said that's not enough for 2 teachers, so they wanted to fire one of the teachers and kick out some of the kids. So the parents did something the first time I saw it happen, but it had happened before, and it certainly has happened since. They all got together and they went down to the school board and they lobbied and they changed the school board's response. Well, they got the school board to back them up to stop the administration from doing what they wanted to do. This is a recurring theme in my talk. And so we kept those 44 kids and 2 teachers until the end of the year, at which time a lot of the parents, a lot didn't want to be in this program, and Celestine definitely didn't want to be in this program, and they left. And they left because nobody really knew what this program was for. There were those parents that said, stop me if you've heard this before, I want more structure. And there were these parents that said, I don't want any structure. There were those parents that said, I think we should be teaching this, I don't think we should be teaching that, and so on and so forth. And the big problem was, who's in charge here? Celestine and I were both hired as educational consultants, and the parents were seen as the people that ran the program. Celestine definitely didn't want to get involved in that. So she got a job doing something else, and like within a year or two was a principal and crossed to the other side. Celestine's great, and I haven't seen her in a long time, but I tell her that she would do. So that was me. And the first year that I was in the program, when Celestine was still here, I kept thinking that she was going to be in charge, but she didn't want to be in charge. And I didn't know how to be in charge. And parent meetings consisted of parents screaming at each other. Literally screaming and crying and dying. Because the kind of energy it takes to start a program like this may not be the kind of energy it takes to keep it going. And so at the end of the first year, 74, 75 that I was here, I remember the last parent meeting we agreed to take a vote. First time we'd ever taken a vote. It was 18-2. And the two people that voted against whatever it was we were voting on said, that doesn't matter, I'm not going to do it anyway. And so the next year we were down to 24 kids and one teacher. And anybody that came into the room, I would say, hey, how you doing? And I'd talk to them for 3 hours. Because I needed bodies in this school. And I would say things like, well, I think it works. Because I didn't really know. It was a question of faith. And I'd read some of these books, but I didn't really know what I was doing anyway. And the parents were into it, the parents that were here. So I got a couple of kinds of kids in the program. And kids whose parents, I think, really got it and wanted to participate and be with their kids because that was the whole idea. They didn't have the attitude of, oh, damn, I got to go to work. I got to go work in Charquin today. It was the attitude of, yeah, I get to go to work in Charquin today. That's the difference. You still have to ask yourself how you feel. And then I got those kids that the principals would say to their parents when they were at another school as the child was climbing the walls and beating on the kid next to them, you know, I think your son would be better off. There's this program over at Laurel School. It's for kids who need more space. And so we got a lot of spaced kids in this program in the very beginning, and it was difficult. Because I had parents that would come in and say, oh, he just needs to be loved, and they'd sit this child on their lap and take care of him, and of course, you had a ball, and then they'd say, well, time to go to work. And they'd be gone, and then the kid would start pounding on the kid next to them, and so on and so forth. But anyway, I got a lot of pages to cover here, and I'm still on the first page. So what happened was, over the course of the next few years, a lot of things happened. We finally we vaguely defined what we were. This is what's available out there, and Charquin sort of picked a spot in there. This is what we stand for. We're not going to do this, and we're not going to do that. We're going to do this much within the realm of curriculum and management and how we treat kids and all that kind of stuff. So we established a rudimentary and a little bit more defined philosophy than we love the earth and the whales, and we don't want to salute the flag. We still do those things, but we started gaining some ideas about what we stood for, and I had decided about my third year that the program needed some leadership, and that would have to come from somebody that was here every day, and I guess it was me because I was the only one that was here every day. And I think that needed to happen, but it may not have been the best thing to happen because a lot of the direction started coming from me. And that may have been good or may have been bad, but it certainly is important that the parents remember all the time that this is their program. They started the program, they own the program, they have a right to the program, and ultimately the program swings on what they decide to do with it. And that means that several other anecdotes I have down the road where the administration in this district wanted to do one thing with Charquin, and Charquin didn't want to go that way. And the only way to deal with it was to go to the school board, because the school board tells the administration what to do. It's the nature of school districts, depending on whom you believe, that information and orders and rules and stuff have a one-way flow. I've never in my career as a school teacher evaluated a principal. They don't want to know. I mean, who cares how the teachers feel? Have you ever evaluated a teacher besides in Charquin? You don't get a choice. You go into your neighborhood school, Mrs. Beasley is your child's teacher. If Mrs. Beasley is not the kind of person that you want, you know, Fifi to be with 5 days a week, you don't have a choice. The public school's attitude is, go someplace else, and that means private school. Well, the Charquin is trying to do a little of both. We've had enlightened administrators over the years. Frank Perry was an advocate for us. He's now on the school board. I don't know what kind of a board member he is. He was not a Charquin-type person exactly, but he started teaching in a parent co-op nursery, so he knew what we were trying to do. He was helpful. But for the most part, they have scale. John Hassel was appointed as a principal by Frank Perry because they finally got it that we needed a principal that was at least benign. So over the years, we began to have more of a focus and actually grew, and people began to feel this is a pretty good place to put my kids, because it was always, and hopefully will always be, a place where kids and parents could come and enjoy themselves. That was the best part. Over the years, we had for a while, I had some real strong arguments about parents don't come and work in this program, they're out of here. And I insisted that that should never be the case. A child was never kicked out of this program because the parent was a slut. Sometimes I wish we could kick the parents out, but never the kids. And so we had lots of different ways of deciding what to do and arguing in parent meetings and stuff, but we more or less went along. And my attitude was, if a parent wants to be here, then we want them here. If they don't want to be here, we don't want them here, because they made everybody's life miserable anyway. Some of you still make our lives miserable. So then it got to the point that we were at 30 and at 32, and then we had to get a waiver to go to 35 every year because there were so many people that wanted to be in the program. And then we had a year where, you know, people just couldn't leave well enough alone, and there were too many babies coming up. And so we were either going to have people not get into the program that were already in the program, or we were going to have to expand, which we did. And we added Norma. And the program has never been the same since. Not because of Norma, but because it's different now. So whenever anybody says, well, in the old days, which old days are you talking about? And if you're talking about the first year I taught here, it was hell. Parent meetings were worse then than they've ever been since. And nobody agreed on anything, and everybody had a different perspective about what was going on. But one thing that was different about in the old days was that we were a very small group. And communication was immediate. I saw almost every parent almost every week. And we had it was easier to use family. Then we added Norma, and soon thereafter, not too long after Norma, I don't know how long after Norma.
3.
Yeah. With me it was K4, I think, for a long time. And then, well, it was K3, and then it was K4. And then when Norma came, I think we went to K5. I don't remember.
Yeah,
you know.
we did.
And then when we decided to go to 90, we added Amy, and we went to K6, which is, depending on how you feel about it, logical. For a while there, our 5th graders were getting out of Charquin and going into a classroom here as 6th graders for a year or two and getting the real-world experience before they went on to junior high. But anyway, so we expanded to 90, and that's where we are now. And I think I'm done with page 1. Oh, and I didn't want to print this. No, it just tells about what is. It actually, a lot of this tells about the structure structure of the classroom, and I know what the structure is of the classroom. And when people say, well, we didn't used to do it that way, every year was different. Some years we did, this was real structured, we had kids doing this, and another year we might have done that. So you could say, well, we never did it that way about everything, because every year was different. So it kind of depends on who's in the program, what they want, and how strong the leadership is. And some of the leadership issues when I was in the program, the leadership questions. Here's an anecdote. About my 6th year in here, I had a very strong parent who said, well, in my center we're going to do DISSTAR. And DISSTAR is this kind of like hooked on phonics. It's not a good program. And I knew it wasn't a good program because I read some stuff and I intuitively knew it wasn't good, but I couldn't explain it. And she was going to do it. And so it was the first time I really had to say, no, you can't do that. And she said, why? And I couldn't explain it. But it was one of those questions about where we sit in the educational continuum. There are some issues in curriculum, not just in our society and our family and treating children, but there are some issues that are the teacher's domain, because I'm the expert, that I couldn't live with. It really boiled down to, you teach DISSTAR, I don't teach here. That was what spurred me to go to graduate school and learn a whole lot more. So I can argue with those pedagogues a lot now and tell them why, even if it's not true, but it sounds good. But anyway, that was one of those cases where every once in a while there comes an issue that has to be dealt with, and it was in the leadership mode back then when I was a teacher. It was a little bit easier, and now with new teachers and things being kind of up in the air, it's really hard on the teachers to take a stand like that, because I don't know how much trust they have or how much power they have. It's up to you to decide. But that's an issue about curriculum. Let's see, parent involvement. I didn't talk about guilt. Guilt is a very strong motivator. You know, if you don't come and work in the classroom, it's not as good as if you do. That's what I used to say all the time, and it's still true. So if you want the kids to just kind of wander around and bump into walls and stuff, don't show up. We go in and out of having different, yeah, this is when I usually tell people how it runs, but I can't tell you how it runs because I don't know. I do think that one of the things that is true about this program is, comes from my favorite author of education, and that's this guy, John Dewey. And this is called Democracy in Education, and it was written in 1916, and it's not any less true than it is today. I have another John Dewey here that was about 20 years later called Experience in Education. This is easier, even I can do this. And it's got a whole bunch of red marks and stuff in it. The other thing for me, A.S. Neal is about the affect and how kids feel, and this is about the politics of what school is about. I know I've been jumping around, but I got to hit this. Public schools in general, are a tremendous failure in the United States and in most of the world, because what they're supposed to do is create citizens for a democracy who know what they're doing and why, and are active about participating and think and make their own decisions based on their own discoveries about what's going on. I don't think that's what schools are really doing. I know that's not what schools are doing. And by the time people graduate from most schools, they're not prepared to make decisions. They'd rather sit and nod in front of the TV set, and that's how certain politicians get elected, because it looks good to me. John Dewey writes a lot about our duty as a society to educate thinkers and educate children in a system that they are more or less in control of, and they are honored for who they are. John Dewey, with other people, founded some schools in Chicago in the 30s that did just that. Schools were very open from actually from the 1880s, or for some schools that were really, really open and focused around children being in charge of their thinking. And we know today that the only way you really learn anything is to learn it yourself. I think it went along pretty well in a lot of areas until the 50s, when this is kind of a lecture. So the behavioralists took over, and then Sputnik went up, and everybody went nuts and decided the way we're going to beat the Ruskies is to make school harder. And we we really got in trouble then, and that's why schools are kind of the way they are today. A person that takes off from John Dewey is this person, Piaget, who is that was the political side. This is the curriculum, academic development side. Everything I tried to do, and most of what I have tried to do curriculum-wise in Charquin can be found in the writings of Piaget. Not everything he did was absolutely correct, but this program, academically or curriculum-wise, is grounded, should be grounded in what's called constructivist attitudes, which means children construct their own learning. It isn't something that can be poured in. They can't be trained like rats, which is what the behavioralists and Skinner thought. I was just reading an article today about this issue. Behaviorists are right when they say that you can train rats to jump through hoops, and you can train kids by threatening them, and they'll do their worksheets. And that fits in this little circle, but around that is constructivism, which goes way beyond that. This central part we had to go through, but beyond that, we're making changes and understanding a lot more about how kids grow. And that's what Charquin should be. Charquin should be taking the old system that we had in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, and it's the next step. And believe me, it's the next step. For the last 15 years, I've gone to workshops, and I've listened to speakers at conferences talk about how, you know, for public schools to really be responsive, they need to have more parent involvement, they have to have cross-age teaching, they have to have innovative, I mean, they name this program every single time. I'm dumbfounded. I have professors that have come in and looked at this program and said, I just wrote an article about that. Or this is really what we're talking about. Can I send some kids down here? Kids love it. Most of you like it. Teachers at workshops say, can I come and visit and do? I mean, some people go away and say that's not for me. And that's the point. It's a choice. You don't have to be here, but at least it's a choice. At least Hayward has a choice. Most school districts don't. I spend a lot of time now reading frameworks. I didn't bring in the math framework, it's at my car. But the state writes books about how education should be happening in the classroom. And there's nothing in the language arts framework that I disagree with. I think Charquin is much closer to what the people at the state government education level are writing than it is anywhere else. It's not like we're doing anything radical. I hate to call this an alternative school. This is a school, and it's the way it should be run. I'm moving as fast as I can. And I'm sort of getting back to one of my main focuses, and it was part of what I wrote about in my thesis, and that is that before we deal with much of any of the curriculum, the things that have to be met first are what's called the affective side of children, and that means their emotional well-being. That's one of the things that really separates Charquin from the rest of the world. Not that they have whips and chains in room 2 or anything like that, but it is true that until children feel comfortable on many emotional levels, they're not ready to learn anywhere else. So Charquin, in its family and having all these people around and stuff, and having buds and playing together and stuff, there's no way you can measure the value of that. But from it springs kids that have confidence and kids that are ready to learn. In a lot of classrooms, kids don't get that kind of nurturing. And it isn't that teachers are necessarily mean. They can't do that. One teacher, 33 kids? Not possible. Charquin offers, there are things that Charquin offers, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Other classrooms just can't offer. I don't want to talk anymore about the academic stuff. I can talk about that later, about a reading program and stuff. Oh, sense of humor, very important. And let's see, anecdotes. Kids, I started wondering if this works. And kids, I would get reports back from high school. Early on, some of the reports were, well, those Charquin kids, all they ever want to do is talk about it. You know, instead of just sitting there, having been trained for 7 years in the system of yes teacher, no teacher. I'm drawing a very strict generalization, I realize that. The kids in Charquin are used to being able to talk to an adult, or talk to a pal, or talk to a teacher on a more or less equal footing. Very, very important. I can't emphasize that enough. That's one of the things that Charquin affords us to do, is to develop relationships. When you have 7 years to be with the same people, then you don't have to have artificial discipline measures like grades. There's no reason to have grades. There really isn't a reason to have grades. And a lot of teachers that I say, I don't give grades, they say, I wish I didn't have to. But they have to. There's a whole lot. I could talk for 2 hours about assessment, but I won't. What we have in Charquin was 7 years of being together with the kid and 15 years with the same family, if you're crazy enough, is all these possible ways of doing it differently. So discipline's not a problem. I mean, if you think discipline here is a problem, you haven't been into a regular classroom like that. It's just not a problem, because kids discipline each other and there's parents around. Maybe disciplining parents is the issue. Seriously. But it's not a problem for me as a teacher, nearly as much as it would be in a traditional program. Well, let me go ahead and say the other things about it. So one of the things that Charquin can do that no other schools can do is have this 7 years. So what can you do in those 7 years? You can do what people that are writing articles and people that are teaching at the college level right now are pleading for. Let the kids play, especially at the primary level. Kindergartners should never do a worksheet. I hope I'm not offending you. I mean, they could do like draw pictures and stuff like this, and do fun stuff. But if they're filling in numbers and letters on a reading worksheet, it's just not right. And it's not my opinion, and people write about this stuff all the time. And kids should be able to work at their own rate. They should always be challenged. But if a child, the only way for people to learn is to be wrong. If you're always right, you don't learn anything. I didn't say that in this book here. You have to be, I mean, that's the theory of learning and development, is when people make mistakes. This goes for adults too. When people make mistakes, then they have to rearrange their thinking. But if they make mistakes, if the teacher says, what's the answer to number 12? And you say 6, and she goes wrong and points to the next kid, well, I mean, you lost them. So, in a program like this, hopefully, we let kids be wrong a lot. And the way to do that is to do it with love and with humor and encourage them. When the kid says 6, you say, oh, that's an interesting answer. How come 6? Take the time. Also, another way to make them feel bad and make them wrong all the time is to pretend like they're all the same, which is what the system does. Even though teachers don't want that to happen, teachers would rather have it differently. No matter how old you are, if you turn 5 in the last year, boom, you're in kindergarten. So if you turn 5 in November, you're not even 5 yet, you're in kindergarten with a kid that turned 5 in January. And the kid that turned 5 in January is a girl, and she can already read. And you're not really even sure what your dad's name is. It is the culture of public school that most teachers are all the same. And they all demand that kids kind of be the same too. There's been a lot written about the culture of American education. So if a child acts a certain way, if she's really good at reading, or if she's good in class and doesn't fidget, then she's a good girl. But if your kid isn't like that, then, well, you know what that kid is. And if it's time for everybody to do math, and everybody has to do the same math because you're all in the same classroom, then you have to have good kids and bad kids, or right kids and wrong kids. There's no way around it. And in a system that makes sure those kids are tested by their age level every year, then you have to have the bell-shaped curve. You've got to have below average, and you have to have... My experience, and I'm not telling you a lie, is that I really believe this, that there are no below average kids. There really aren't. Every one of the kids that I've had in this classroom has special talent. And it's absolutely true. I know it sounds trite, and I want you to believe me. Maybe it is trite, but it's also true. And I feel most sorry for the kids that are in systems where they're not allowed to be who they are. And Charquin should stand for, if nothing else, helping kids to be that crazy personality that they already are. And we can, because we've got this family and we got all these people around that go, oh, that's okay, come on, let's go over here, you can bang your head against this wall. And we can have kids help work it out, and we can have that. One of the things that hopefully has always been true about the parents in this class, we're all nuts in one way or another. I mean, you're all crazy to be schlepping your kids here every day and putting up with meetings and all this kind of stuff. But you all sort of share the same attitude about wanting to have this place for your kid and putting the energy into it and saying, I'm not going to. Having kids is great fun. I don't want to not spend time with my kid just because the system says I got to say bye-bye at the door when she turns 5. Don't want to do it. Don't want to do it. It wouldn't be right. So what else? Oh, and then we get team teaching. From a professional standpoint, all this team teaching that goes on is the best way to teach. I mean, you can't, absolute power corrupts absolutely. I didn't say that either. And when teachers get locked in the same room, year after year after year, with the same age level of kids, they can't help the kids study. And they can't help but cheat by finding ways to not bother with it. But when you have adults in the room all the time going, why did you do that? You can't cheat. You can't become, well, maybe you can. I haven't discovered a way to become that clever as a desk monitor. And you also get a lot of feedback. One, I have to admit, on the column of reasons to leave Charquin, there were little scratches about not having to put up with whiny parents, because it gets old after a while. But you live through it. But on the plus side, written in bold, was all the feedback you get, all the positive feedback you get, and a lot of that for the teachers is team teaching and not having to be alone. And certainly for the parents, it's, hey, we're here tonight. You know, we're doing this kind of thing. It's a community. And we've had deaths, and we've had suicides, and we've had a lot of divorces, and all that kind of stuff. And Charquin has been a community for the people involved in it. It is a family, it is a community, and that is something that can't possibly be measured by a test. And I'm telling you, it's so important. People write about it all the time. One of the reasons I know it's important is that kids that go on to junior high and high school need a place to belong. And if they don't have a place to belong, they get in trouble. They need to join band, or they need to join chess club, or they need to be on a team, or they need to go to church group, or they need to do something, but they've got to belong to something. And they have to feel like somebody loves them and cares for them. And the kids that went to Charquin are still Charquin kids. And they come back from college, and they want to kind of check it out and see what's going on. And they see each other on campus, and they know that they're Charquin kids. They have a place that loves them and that they come from. Sometimes their families aren't intact, but Charquin is still intact. And you can't measure that. So when the bad guys want to do away with a program like this, what do you say? Where's your test scores? We have test scores now. As much as I hate test scores, we have test scores that validate that this program is succeeding. Kids we took an 8-year study, did an 8-year study of kids in Charquin, and the control group was the rest of Markham School. And our kids do terrible on the first and second and sometimes third grade tests in reading and math, which is good, because they do things like book, cook, dump on this test, and we don't teach that way. We never taught that way, and it even says in the framework to not teach that way, but people teach that way anyway, because they want to pass the test. Dumb reason, but they do it anyway. But then in the 5th and 6th grade, when the tests are no longer buck-cuffed up, but you're like, what did that paragraph mean? Charquin kids kill it. They're like 1 or 2 grade levels ahead of the control group because they had meaning as the reason that they were doing stuff in math and reading and all this other kind of stuff. It was slow, but they come around to it. So that by the time they go to junior high, yes, children have a hard time when they go to junior high. Not all kids that come out of Charquin are going to be Rhodes Scholars. Maybe none of them. Well, you have to have, when people say, how do kids do when they come out of Charquin? How do most kids do when they come out of 6th grade? You know? They run the gamut. But I would be willing to bet that a huge percentage of Charquin kids
relative to other kids, still love school, and they still like themselves. And they can't wait to go to junior high. The consequence of that is even the kids that I was terribly worried about, I didn't say this to their parents, but I was terribly worried about, are making the honor roll and are getting awards. And last year we had the president of Hayward High and the valedictorian from Hayward High, from that non-academic hippie program. And it's a measure of Charquin's success, and I think the measure is we didn't screw them up. We might not have done anything for them, but we didn't screw them up. And the other measure of it is that they came to Charquin because they had families that cared about them and have this community attitude. And those kids are going to probably succeed wherever else they go. This, that's academic stuff. Let's see, I talked about what parents get. Parents get out of this, kids get all kinds of stuff out of this program. And if you don't know what they get out of this program, you haven't been paying attention. But parents, a lot of parents have come from Charquin and gone on and gotten their teaching credential and become teachers because they get turned on to the fact that you can do something. The evolution of a parent is so neat because you know you have that first baby and that's all there is in the world, and even if it isn't, you will have a choice. And then parents come and they finally get into kindergarten with their firstborn, and it's an eye-opening experience certainly, and they can't wait to be here every day with their kid. They spend a lot of time getting dirty and stuff, and worry about how dirty the classroom is. But then something happens over the 7 years, and by the time they're kids in 5th or 6th grade, they got a job. They're out of here. A lot of you parents, by the time you've gotten away from that area of your life, it's time to get back with like other stuff. A lot of people. And those of you who are blessed with not having to do that, you're lucky. So there's this evolution of parents, and some of them have had so much fun learning about learning in here that they've gone on to become teachers themselves. Not that you weren't teachers in the first one. But one of the things that's neat about that experience is the first couple of times you're in here and you do lessons and stuff, it's a total bomb. And you think, I must be either stupid or really not talented, or everybody hates me, or all of the above. And you learn things about discipline, and you learn things about what your child is really like in public. And little Fifi is not little Fifi. You know, it's like dogs when they get in a pack. And so you have to learn about that, and you learn about other kids, and you go, oh my God, what are we going to do? You got this, you know, this mother Attila. and her son Igor, and Igor is, you know, I've had kids running around the room with a compass, you know, the for drawing circles, going like this. And I've watched parents watch them. Like, you know, you can stop there. Of course, it would be like Attila to say, no, he's going to be a surgeon. I talked about the social aspect. Personal growth. Yes, you get that. There's lots of people that started off as like running around and not knowing what they're doing in here, and then they sort of take charge of something, and then they take charge some more, and pretty soon I'm sort of afraid to ask them if I can work in their room. And there are people that, for one reason or another, never are lucky enough to come into the classroom. They can only hear about it from their kid and wonder what that means. You know? Like, we did doy faces today. And what does that mean? I think that the advantages, one of the other advantages for Charquin that you can't get anywhere else is it is a place that says, come on down, instead of, you know, stay at the door. And that's what it's supposed to be. I now have my oldest daughter, Kate, in a 6th grade classroom in a traditional open public school. And it's not come on down anymore. And not only that, they're doing things that aren't in the framework. The teacher's having the kids do pages of long division. And my daughter copies the page of the math book, word for word, out of the math book. That's what she does. And the principal should be going down to that room and saying, you can't do that. But she doesn't. She says, well, everybody has a different style. Well, that different style made my daughter hate arithmetic. So one of the things that teachers may not like about Charquin is that you can go up to your teacher and say, why are we doing this? And it's incumbent upon the teachers in this classroom to answer your question. The other thing that's neat about Charquin is, for now anyway, it's still independent from the rest of the situation here. So we were doing whole language before it had a name. And we were doing manipulative math before it was mandated. Because we didn't have to do the stuff that the district had handed down, and then give it to the teacher and say, you got to do this. And most teachers say, but I don't want to do this. This doesn't. You have to do this. For a couple of years in Charquin, I had a principal who said, you're not filling out your progress charts in the kids' folders down in the office. Well, I hadn't used the books for 2 years. Filling out the progress charts. So I said, oh gosh, I'm sorry, I'll do that. So I didn't do it. And then about 6 months later, she got back from shopping, and she said, you still haven't filled out your progress card. So I went down to the office, and I pulled out all the kids' files, and I filled them out. Like I drew lines through all of the boxes that you're supposed to fill out, like, can say the buck sound, can say the duck sound. And nobody's ever going to look at it except my principal. So she left me a note, like next week, that said, thank you for filling out your card. But I had this sort of attitude that, we're insulated. And lots of times I was able to say, well, this is an alternative program, and we don't do it that way. And that was enough. Sometimes that's all I had to do. Sometimes I had to say, parents, we're really in trouble here. You need to lobby the school board and take charge of your program. And that's what we did. So anyway, I'll stop talking in just a minute. And I would like to say that the further I get away from this program, the more I miss it. And the more I realize how incredibly unique it is and what a fabulous opportunity it is. No, it doesn't exist anywhere else. I am going to be in a meeting later this month in Menlo Park at Peninsula School, which is an alternative private school. And there's going to be a bunch of alternative school type people there. And they really want to hear from me because it's a public school. Most people have to pay to get this. We pay. But we don't pay for their pocketbooks. So one of the things about, I volunteer in a private school in Oakland. It costs those parents about $700 or $800 a month to have their kids in this school. And it's a great school, and they got lots of neat stuff. But those people are rich. I couldn't put my kid in that school. And so Charquin is the public. On the positive side, the Hayward School District is affording us this opportunity to take this challenge and this alternative or this school of choice and run with it. And if we don't run with it, we're nuts. Because if Charquin disappears, and I'm not saying that nobody said it is, but if you don't make sure that it stays alive, then this opportunity is gone, and there isn't one anywhere else like it. It's really, really special. As I said at the beginning, when I tell teachers about this, they can't believe it, and they all want to come and see it. Because it's what people have been writing about for years and years and years. The end. Is there a question?
Oh, yeah.
I have a question about, now that you've been away from the school for 2 years, much to our dismay, have you made any observations, or has anything come to you about anything that we have done in the past or are doing now that you think we could do better or in a different way?
I'm not sure I know what you're doing now. One of the things that's happened to Charquin has happened to the Hayward School District, and it's turmoil. So I think one of the real critical things about Charquin is getting to pick who the teachers are. And I think we're lucky to have some teachers that, see eye to eye with us, but, and hopefully we can keep them. That's a critical issue, who the people are that can determine policy, because they're the only ones that are here day in and day out. And so that's, I don't know if you can do anything about that, but I think one of the things on a political note that you need to do right now in this climate in Hayward is to make sure that you have good, strong leadership. Now, that may not be an arena for the teachers right now, because they're still trying to figure out what's going on. And it means it's incumbent upon the parents to make sure that they're heard at the district level. I don't know if the district, in the 16 or 17 years I was here, I never had more than a 2-minute conversation with the administrator about this program. They don't know, they don't care. They think it's something different than what it is. So I would say that one of the things that you need to keep doing is making sure there's a locus of leadership somewhere, so that you have spokespeople to the outside. I know there's some issues, some specific issues right now in dealing with Sharon O, and who deals with it directly?
Some people on the teacher selection committee do, I know the teachers do, and beyond that, I don't know.
No, we are forming tonight, probably, a
Oh,
committee that will be doing.
you do on tribes, right?
Yeah, I'll do for specific.
There's a lot of answers to that question. One of the answers to it is, I don't know, because every year is different.
Yeah.
So when it comes to questions about curriculum and management and when centers happen and all that kind of stuff, it's a battle that changes every year and within years. The last year I was here, we were going to do a new scheduling, and it lasted about 4 weeks, and we went back to the old schedule. So, yeah.
Just one other question, and that is, in lieu of the budget cuts in Hayward, and this is the beginning of the budget cuts in Hayward, do you see Charquin being just an additional commodity, and that it would be more feasible at some point for them to dissolve it, and it just go by the wayside like a crap? I don't know how long it's going to take for the budget to be resolved, but do you see us going down a tube?
There's no logical reason for Charquin to be cut, because it doesn't cost any more money. The district sees us as having an extra classroom, and that is something that we fought for a few years ago, and that school board said that we could have this room for perpetuity. And that is one of those situations where I think there were a few years when Charquin had a PR person. That was one of the posts that a parent could fill, to make sure that downtown and the school board knew who we were and that we were doing this. And we had a publicist, and they went out and got TV cameras in here. We were on TV, and the year that they tried to take this room away from us, in December we won a statewide award for the most innovative language arts program in California. And the district had been trying for years to win one of these Golden Bell Awards. And that was as much a PR ploy as anything else. And so when they went to, it was lucky that year when they went to, and then like 2 months later, John came down and said, "We're taking your room." No, let's talk about it, nothing like that. So of course, you guys went down and lambasted them. And one of the things was, they had just gotten us up before the school board 2 months before, and oozed all over us for winning this Golden Bell, and then duh. So the answer is, you've got to keep. If you just stay behind these walls, they will whittle away.
The reason I brought this question up is I've heard that, there are a couple people that have left, and I've heard that there was a concern that we needed to meet our numbers, and then I started thinking, when has it ever been that Charquin, if a parent or a family decided it didn't meet their needs, they should be able to pull out? That should be a healthy choice.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that the program needs to take a look at, well, how come it didn't meet that person's needs? Because I think once you do that, you give up an awful lot.
Yeah, you don't want to give up. That's the kernel of the theory behind a program like this. It is a school of choice. And I think that's what school districts across the country should, and people are advocating, and I've advocated ever since this program started, that there should be competition. It's that Mrs. Beasley argument, you know, if you don't like it, go someplace else. There's no place else to go if you don't have any money.
But my fear is that if we start having to focus on, oh, we need to create that other person,
Right.
that we are then going to try to sell it and therefore sell out.
Well, I think that Charquin every year is a dynamite program, and if every parent in Hayward knew about it, you'd have more people wanting to get in than possible. So part of that going outside of the walls, we did have, over the years, we've had different recruitment committees. Oftentimes, those are charged with more than just recruiting anybody. I mean, we've always had an issue about ethnicity in this program. We need to always maintain that, and that brings up a question about who's in charge of what. I mean, do we get to decide who comes into this program, or do they just go on a list in alphabetical order? We've always been in charge of who gets into this program. We try to do it fairly, but I think the parents need to deal with that issue on two fronts. They need to get more proactive about getting more people in here, so it won't be an issue. But they also need to be prepared to fight it if it does become an issue. For years, we had too many kids in this program. We should be given a grace period, and so on. But you have to be proactive. You can't wait for it to come and get you. One of the things that we had in Charquin for years and years and years was sort of classic in the development of society. We always had an enemy out there. No matter how bad we were in here, we at least had somebody to hate more than others. So that kind of helps. Sharon?
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
Also, I think for many years, when we were fighting for our existence, Charquin parents were extremely active politically in having very personal relationships with school board members, in calling out the Charquin vote, which after all these years, when you think how many people in Hayward are in some way either Charquin, now or Charquin in the past. I even have kids who are grown enough to vote for school board members who are former Charquinites. That we are a powerful political body and need to have an awareness of that. When we show up in mass with children at school board meetings for months at a time, it gets to be, oh God, there they are. And we've given that up because there's been some relative security while I was gone. But if it gets to the point where we're relatively insecure, certainly we need to get back on that political bandwagon. When you call someone on the school board and say, we delivered this many votes, and you came down and promised us that you would support our program, where is your support?
Well, and there was a point at which we dealt with the school board one time in a very tenuous position. So we went out there, we invited them to the meetings. They came to a Charquin meeting and had a debate, or they talked about themselves. Most of them came. And then there were a couple of years where one of our parents was a campaign manager for one of the board members, and so on and so forth. Hayward is, in the past, I don't know about now, but Hayward in the past has been politically rather inert. So and Charquin isn't. You people are here for a lot of reasons, but you're active people, and you can make just this group in this room right now can make a huge difference in Hayward.
The other thing to remember is that our school board has stood by us most of the time and is very supportive of them. Like when the book thing came up, I know that I called them in support of the Impression series, and they were very happy to hear from us, and they asked what school I was from and what program I was from. And they were very happy to hear parents in support of things that they're doing too. And that really helps too, to show them we care.
The reading series was put upon a few years ago. It was selected great reading series. And a bunch of people ended up down at a huge school board meeting where several people accused the board of being devil worshippers because they were bummed about Halloween in this book. But there were a few articulate and dynamic speakers at that meeting, and 4 of them were Charquin parents. The one thing that I was sorry about is that they didn't have a big yellow Charquin on their shirt. You got to make sure that you say, "Hi, I'm from Charquin," or especially when you are doing something positive. Be political. Don't miss that chance.
And the other thing was that the woman, the wife of the school board member said, "I'll take your name and number." She thought it was negative. Or, "I'll take your name." And when I said I was positive, she said, "I'll put you through to his business." Because there were getting so many negative calls that to hear hear something positive was really important to him and to her, and she was amazed. She said, oh, no, here's his office number, you can call him direct. And so that was really an interesting.
Sure.
I have a couple of academic questions. I'm so concerned with academics, most of you know. I have a third grade son. I've done everything that has been talked about here as far as whole language and reading, and he is still not reading. Is it time to get scared?
Well, no matter what I say, you're going to be scared anyway.
Right. Gee, we've had this conversation before in real life.
I've had this conversation with more than you. Sometimes children have problems with the necessary skills to do things like read, and they need help. And there are ways to get help. You can have specialists work with your kid. There are people in East Bay that I think do a really good job in helping children that have learning disabilities or have learning styles that are very, very different. Some children, some people will never learn to read. I don't think I've come across any in this program with that possibility. So you can always be scared. All I can tell you is that I've had so many instances of children whom we waited upon and they learned to read magically. It really is magic. It's an incredible process. I would much rather wait on a child through the third grade than try to make them do something they're not good at. And we can talk about this personally, or I can talk about it in another session. But there's a lot more danger in trying to make your child read in kindergarten or first grade or second grade than in not trying to make your child read. And I mean sitting down and saying, okay, we're going to read now. You can teach your child to read very easily by reading to her, by having her make lists, by anything that they write or scribble, posting it up on the wall. There's lots of stuff to help your child read. One child in here that we have that is one of my favorite kids to talk about is Michael Hunter, because he had this incredible, well, Michael Hunter cried every day of kindergarten.
So did his sister.
Because the umbilical cord was really long, but it was still there. And his dad is just a sweetheart of a man, and he would acknowledge the truth of that statement. But Michael had a ferociously wonderful vocabulary for a kindergarten. When he was in second grade, I was asking kids what their favorite TV show, and he said, The News. And he was serious. So he had this incredible vocabulary, but he couldn't read. If you were in a traditional environment, he might have been made to feel really bad about himself because he was getting wrong on his worksheet a lot. In the fourth grade, boom, he learned to read. Like in a week, he learned to read. It all sort of came together. It's sometimes very magical. Some children, however, may not be there linguistically or may have problems in tying it all together. And you've heard the mysterious word dyslexia. And there is that group, DAM, Mothers Against Dyslexia. I'm just kidding. There is a lot that we can do about it. One of those things is some of these books that are available to tell us what to do in a holistic manner. And if you really get scared, let me give you the name of somebody that I really trust in testing your child. If one person, I don't know, Sharon,
Yes.
you may have some people too. There's a person named Paul Seidelman that's worked with several kids out of Charquin and other kids I know, and I think it's in San Leandro still. But I really trust his judgment, and he understands what Charquin's trying to do.
We're really fortunate that we have right here at Markham a really good resource specialist.
I don't know who he is.
Ronnie, and she's just really loving and sweet and low-key, and Heather's down there every morning. The issue I have, and I speak for Linda Jasser here, who has 3 learning disabled boys, is that sometimes when you wait and wait and wait, that child isn't getting anything.
Doesn't happen.
So I personally am in favor of screening. If you do the screening test and there's no problem, it's just a maturational issue, you get to sleep at night. If there is a learning disability, then as a program, as a teacher, we can, as teachers, all of us, we can address those issues.
resource specialist here, then I would definitely recommend it.
She is, you know me, you couldn't find a more critical person in Hayward. And, you know, Heather's there. You want to talk about long umbilical cords, she's still wrapped around her neck.
There's two of them, doesn't she?
What? There's two of us? Well, you know, I'm only really, well, mine.
For years, we had a resource specialist whom I got along with personally okay, but she was definitely the other side of, you know, if you're really bad at this, let's do a whole lot more of it.
Yeah, that was unfortunate, but she's gone.
Okay, so since we have a good one, then, Sherry, sign up. Have you contested now? And-
Sleep at night.
Yeah. And did you have a second question?
Yeah, and that one was hypothetical. Mine's in the 6th grade now, but anyway. Algorithms. I wanted to hear you, I need a little brush up on, as I remember it, our algorithm studies have mostly been in the 5th grade and our parents have done it at home. I'd like to hear you explain that.
Algorithms are like the way you do multiplication problems, like, or addition and subtraction, you know, 9 plus 1 is 10, carry to 1, and so on. And there's a lot that I can say about that in regard to developmental issues, in regard to what's happening in math education. The people at the forefront of, that I think are at the forefront of math education, Marilyn Burns is one of them, and she's written a lot of really good books, is in favor of kids developing their own algorithms, that you don't teach them how to do multiplication. They figure out how to do it themselves. I know that sounds scary, but how do you feel about math? One of my pat statements is you can struggle for 6 months to try to teach 3rd graders how to do borrowing and carrying, and half of them will get turned off to math. They won't like it, and they'll think they're stupid. And it's not that they're stupid; they're not ready yet. There's some very serious developmental issues about what it takes to do borrowing and carrying. Or you can try to do it in 5th grade and probably teach everybody in the class in about a half an hour. You can wait that long. And in Charquin, that's the thing. We have this luxury of waiting that long. So Sharon's right. If you have a child you suspect has some real difficulties, check it out. But especially in math, what I hoped to do for years in Charquin was to not teach algorithms or the tricks to doing multiplication until the 5th grade. There's no reason to do a lot of math, but don't do a lot of arithmetic. That may sound like an oxymoron, but it's not, because building that foundation for inquisitiveness and understanding relationships and patterns, the new math framework is very clear about this. Now, arithmetic is a very small part of what math is. A big part of it is the relationship between patterns and how much and how many and all this kind of stuff. And then when they're developmentally able to balance a lot of things at once, then teach them that other stuff, or don't. But don't get too anxious about arithmetic. The kids that are coming out of Charquin are doing fine. Teresa, did you ever?
Sometimes I wonder about kids who want to go ahead and do something. There are some kids who would love
A workbook.
to be learning to read when they're in kindergarten. And we're not doing reading groups. They want to learn to read. It's important to them. They ask about it. And maybe, they're older, maybe they're developmentally ready enough.
Well,
And then
you
there
can do
are
it.
kids,
Go ahead. And then there are kids.
who maybe would love to do math, column addition, and we don't do it. I quite frankly know a lot of kids are really sick of patterns.
Well, then,
I wonder if sometimes we get into this idea that we need to do all this as the groundwork, but yet maybe we ground it in too darn much.
well, I think maybe you need to get some more curriculum. I'm not saying you can't do algorithms. I don't think you should do pages of arithmetic. There's ways you can fold in algorithms into, certainly in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. There's some great curriculum out there. There's a couple of books out now that are what the math framework suggests how we teach is with whole units, and these units should last anywhere from a week to 6 weeks. And in that, embedded within that is lots of math, and one of those things is arithmetic. But they all need to be founded in something that makes sense to them. Like if they're doing adding and subtracting, they're doing it because it relates to how many bears they have or how many pounds of soil they've got or something like that. So it's not a cut and dry issue. I understand it. I would say I used to have reading groups, and I didn't teach them how to read, they taught themselves, and it sounds funny, but our reading groups consisted of them writing their own books, or me writing them for them, whatever, but it was a building process. And then sometimes the kids need to have a reading group in name only, so they feel like they're learning to read, and they are learning to read too. And sometimes they may need to do some number work if they really want to. There's just a couple of admonishments about teaching your kid to read, and I didn't bring it, but I'll send it. There's a sheet that Sharon Zinke, a reading specialist in the district, passed out the last time she came to Charquin and talked about it. Just a couple things not to do, like ways not to correct your kids when they're reading. Like if they're reading along and they make a mistake, let them. And the same thing in math. There's ways to teach kids math that will sort of create a stumbling block for them. But I think if the kids are interested, we should pursue it. And you need to get more curriculum. And gosh and golly, I get paid to answer the phone and make suggestions to people now, so you can call me anytime and ask for at least math curriculum.
I was just going to say too that, the other advantage to Charquin is that if you do cross-age kinds of things, if you've got a first or second grader or first grader who's maybe a little bit more developmentally ready than another child, then they can go with the third graders or something for a day or something and go try those math kind of centers, and you can move kids around.
We did that math menu for years.
And it's really, and you can talk to their teacher about that and let them go and work with kids that are a little older and maybe get a challenge, and then if it's too much for them, they can go back and, they have that freedom to move around. You can work at your own ability level. You don't have to stick with a particular age level. That's not a requirement. It's like you have that option. And so, and sometimes I just wanted to say something too about, I was one of those kids with a third grader who cried every night because he couldn't read. I mean, he felt really bad because he was one of the kids who wasn't picking it up, and he was really having a hard time. And I remember I came in, I was really worried, and it was upsetting to me, and I was crying. We were all crying at the house because he couldn't read. And he picked it up in fourth grade, in the reading groups, writing the things, and he just wasn't ready in third grade. And, it was really scary because, my neighbor's kids all read, and they were all in third grade, and his friends read and stuff. And it was really scary, but it was like, that was one of the good things about having a teacher who knew what developmentally ready meant, so that it wasn't like, well, get him to a tutor right away or whatever, force him to read. Wait, he's going to come in next year, and we'll see then, and give him a chance to work his way into it. So, for me, that was a positive thing to do.
I've always been able to tell the kids who've been taught to read with sound is the most important thing. That they'll read very stilted and read off the sounds. And that's so you can train a kindergartner or a first grader to read that way. It can be done. It's not as difficult. But when a child reads for meaning, when a child reads for sounds, often they'll get to the end of the sentence and they don't. You ask them what they read and they don't know because they're focusing on it sounding good. Because if it doesn't sound right, then somebody's going to correct them. But if a child reads for meaning, they oftentimes make mistakes in what they read, but they know what they read, and they can interpret it. And that's why these kids in the 5th and 6th grade are real readers now. Not that the other system screws them up completely, but I learned to read in a strictly phonic classroom, and to this day, I don't read for pleasure, because it's work, and I read very, very slowly. Does it ring a bell with anybody?
Well, the interesting part about when he finally got to read, and I'll shut up after this, is that he would read along, and he'd read a sentence, and he wouldn't understand the word, but he'd get to the end of the sentence, and he'd go, oh, that's what this word must mean, because it fit into the sentence. And then he figured out that that's what this word meant. So he was like understanding the sentence.
That's why you don't interrupt them in the middle of the sentence.
And
that's wrong.
yeah, and then he read for understanding. And I knew you could tell that he got it. And then he could enjoy the story that he was reading.
And?
Along with the reading concerns, I always had, and I guess it's see which words may need to be corrected. So I think that's fine.
I
as long
feel
as you-
really strongly about your spelling. It's very important to let your child spell the way they want to. If you're going to have a spelling center and talk about spelling, that's great. But that's a different thing than when kids are writing creatively. If you insist every word is spelled correctly, they'll write C-spot run, because they don't want to get anything wrong. But if they can spell in their own way, in a creative writing center, they'll write all kinds of stuff and their language will develop. And then spelling. And then there's ways to deal with spelling. There's techniques in that creative spelling arena to help them learn spelling.
Yes.
One other thing, for us is, our kids don't live in a vacuum when they get home, This isn't the end all. There's more that happens at home, and so if your kid is lacking in something, Jonathan's favorite thing to run to is his calculator every day, and wants to add up enormous numbers together. So that's the time we do it. He may not get it someplace else, but that's where he gets to have those things that those are special things. And reading plan and just taking the places, and all the stuff that we do outside of here is additional to this.
I'm really glad you reminded me of that, because it's something I used to say all the time to the parents. It used to be that the state required 50 minutes of math a day, 50 minutes of writing a day, 50 minutes of social studies a day, 35 minutes of health a day. And they broke it down like that. No way you're going to get that in Charquin. It just ain't going to happen. When in the heyday of math, maybe in this program, which was just a few years ago, the kids maybe got 3 hours of math, and it wasn't real math, a week. And then if we had a field trip, they had 2 hours. And yet they still did really, really well. So, but what else do? We get to go on all these field trips, and we have, like, Grandma comes in and talks about the doll she makes, and we actually have snacking, we get to hang around together, and we do all these plays and stuff, and we do all this kind of stuff. And so, we can't do all that other stuff. You got a choice. You can, and I'm not saying this in a negative way at all. If you want to do all that traditional stuff, they'll do it for you right next door. And it's not a threat or anything like that, honestly. But you got to remember where you are. You're in Charquin now. And so we get to do all this cool stuff together socially, and what it means is, if that other stuff is important to you, because you're a parent in Charquin, you have this agreement that some of the stuff you're going to have to fill in on the side. Hopefully you won't fill it in by taking her to a tutor and having them learn the multiplication tables in the 2nd grade. But it is incumbent upon you to do some of the work. Behind you, Doug.
One of the things that I wanted to kind of add that I've observed so far is, in the time that my children were in traditional school, having all those activities and the time that I spent in the classroom is not so much the actual time that they spend on the activity, because most of it is spent on handing out ditto sheets and telling everybody to sit down and explaining the instructions and re-explaining the instructions so the kids don't understand, and then going back and talking to the kids who are having trouble concentrating because they've really got to look out the window. So they're really not spending that much time on it at all anyway.
There's so many studies about teacher talk, and how teacher talk is 85 to 90% of the classroom time. And when somebody else, if you aren't talking, if you aren't active, you aren't learning. One way of being active, maybe the best way of being active, is talking. That's what cooperative groups is all about. But if you're just sitting there and somebody else is talking, the best anecdote for that for me happened last year when my daughter went to a real school. And I volunteered in the classroom, and so I went in on my first day to help the teacher do a planting session. She was going to plant, the kids were going to plant nasturtiums. She talked for 45 minutes, telling them what they were going to do. She had charts on the board that she probably spent an hour last night or the night before getting this stuff ready, and it was great. I wish I had a camera, because you got all these kids in this classroom, right? And she's talking, and they're all at different stages within 5 minutes, fading out. Now, there's the really sharp kids in the class that did this. This is what they did. They all had novels. There were 6 or 7 people that had novels, and they were reading the novel right on top of their desk. They were quiet, so it was okay. And then there were the kids like me when I was growing up. I had it down, it's like I was looking out the window. And I could look out the window for a long time. In fact,
I did this yesterday in a 4-hour meeting. And then there were kids like my daughter, 1 or 2. My daughter was new to this kind of teaching. So she was like trying to pay attention, trying to make sense of what was going on. And it kept going and going and going. And she was used to Charquin, because in Charquin, you go, oh, okay, we're going to plant seeds today. What should we do? Hopefully that's what you do. Get in groups and decide how we should do this. Boom. And there's this activity and everything that's really noisy and stuff. And you might not think nothing's going on, but it's a hell of a lot more than what's going on when somebody's droning on. But my favorite group of kids were the boys. Right? There were like 2 boys or 3 boys that sat up in this corner, and they were continually getting busted. Every 5 minutes you go, now, Jesse, you've got to pay attention. This is important. So he'd go, all right. And he'd really try, right? And in like 4 or 5 minutes, he'd be falling out of his chair or slamming his desk. Or talking to the guy next to him, he'd get busted all the way through the whole thing. So then it's like, okay, go. Right? When she finally shuts up, it's, okay, go. And the kids that were reading the novels go, they got pots, they got seeds, they got dirt. And the activity lasted about 15 minutes. I was struck by that, and every other time I went into the classroom, it was a similar situation where just because you're talking at them doesn't mean they're paying attention. Now, you ought to know that. But that's the difference in Charquin kids. They get, in traditional kids, not in every classroom, but sooner or later they get it. They get good at these skills of waiting for the teacher to shut up. And it's the issue of how much time are they really learning anyway. If in Charquin they get 15 minutes of real learning time during the morning center period, it may be more time than kids get in traditional, maybe.
This piggybacks on what you're talking about. You know, you've talked about the importance of kids learning to think critically and value their own thoughts. And I just wanted you to put that in more concrete terms. You know, how you see that happening in curriculum, for instance. Just throw out some ideas.
Well, the absolute key to teaching is asking the right question. My favorite teaching moment is when I know I've asked the right question. It is not in giving information. It is in tweaking the brain to go. And so empowering learning is finding ways for the child to generate the thinking. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to ask them a question. And on top of that, another really good way to do that is to ask them a question and then turn them loose with partners or friends to discuss that. And then find a way to turn that into something that can be recorded. And then something that can be revised. One of the keys in writing and arithmetic is writing. There's a big push now for writing in math and revision of that writing. One of the guys from the State Department came down and talked to a group of people this summer about the new state framework in math. And one of the things that really struck me is he said, in this country, we accept 13 years of first drafts in math. You turn in a paper, it's a D, you got a D. That's how the system works. And sooner or later, you all get weeded out. Well, only a certain, I guarantee you that a small percentage of people in this classroom feel good about math. And this is math specifically. But what we should do is find ways for those kids to discuss it, write it down, give feedback on it, write it some more, until they get a final draft in math and reading and all that other kind of stuff. And that means interacting. You know, nobody writes anything professionally without getting an editor. You just don't do it. And so a key to learning is interaction. There has to be interaction going on. The other part of what I said about questions is they have to be good questions. How do you know if the interaction is good interaction? How do you know if the lesson is a good lesson? Good question. I don't know.
Enthusiasm.
It has to relate to the kid. You know, it has to be. You have to be enthusiastic. But you want to do it. That's one of the things that works so well about Charquin in the centers is the teacher doesn't tell you what
what you're gonna do in the center. You tell yourself what you're gonna do. If I gave you a lesson to do here, take these ditto shapes and do them, or take this book and read about it and do this lesson, not gonna be as good as if you created it all yourself. Likewise, the lesson probably is gonna be even better if the child creates it herself. Is that Amy back?
Yeah, I think another real exciting thing that I've seen happen again and again in Charquin is when kids take away what they've experienced here and apply it somewhere else. For instance, I haven't seen it this year, but in the past I've seen a lot of cooperative learning in the garden where they've applied their math and putting in their plots with a string and then growing their veggies and weeding it, and they've worked in groups of 6. And that was always a real exciting time when they could go out and weed their garden and pick their fruit or vegetables, whatever they had grown. Some people chose flowers, but it was their choice of what they were going to put in the garden. It was their decision as to how much area of that garden was going to be for which crop, and even which kids they chose to have in their groups to work within that garden. So they had to really trust each other, that they'd all share in the labors. And now we're more experiencing at home where my husband's working in South Carolina and David all of a sudden doesn't have dad to play basketball with and time on his hands. What's he chosen to do but take the bed in the backyard and make his own garden. And he's putting string out and he's turning this up. And he's deciding what plants will be next to each other. And it's because it's what he did here was fun and positive, and he developed his skill on how to do that. Now,
There's a big push for what's called integrated curriculum.
Yeah.
That's what happens in Charquin. Because one parent's doing gardens and one parent's dissecting weird animals. That I could never even get close to. Are there any kids in here? I can't. I don't like snakes. I don't like hamsters. I don't like any of those little things. But as a teacher, I've done this, and they put my hamster in my face and say, "Isn't it cute?" And I say, "Yes, it's cute." But that's my thing, you know. Like I don't eat grapes. It isn't a political thing. It's funny. Okay? But some parents here do, and some parents dissect animals, and some, you know, it goes like that. Of course, then when you have parents dissect animals, then you get in an argument at a parent meeting because people think that's cool. But the kids are having a good time. So to piggyback on what Ann said, that's another thing that you can't get anywhere else. Is the kids get, they go over here, they go over there, they go over here, they go over there, and it looks like, and every year I felt like, what did they learn this year? I planned all these things, and I got to 2 of them. I planned 10 things, I got to 2 of them, I felt like I failed them, and yet they're all graduating from high school and they're happy. Or they're, I don't know, they're like kids everywhere, only they're my kids, you know, they're special. And you kind of have to understand that the sum is greater than the parts, especially in a situation like this.
I have a first grader, and so I'm fairly new in the program, and even though I try to come to a lot of the meetings and stuff, I find that having a first grader, a lot of Charquin is sort of like a leap of faith for me. And, you know,
I didn't say that yet?
No.
But I wanted to share this thing that happened a couple of weeks ago. Brian, the PE teacher, was not there, and we had a substitute PE teacher who was a nice guy and everything, and I was with the kids. I've sort of got a little buddy that doesn't like PE too well, so I was going with her to kind of encourage her.
Which is something else you wouldn't get in traditional
And
school.
so I was having fun too. I thought it would sort of be a good idea for like a parent to be down there anyway, showing that PE, because I didn't like PE as a kid, and I thought I didn't want kids to think it was just something that they had to do. So maybe if I looked like I was enjoying it, I did it as a fun thing too. So anyways, I go there, and the PE teacher is talking about, they do their little stretching exercises and this and that, and then he arranges this game, and towards the end, he looks over and he says, are these kids different from the other kids? Well, we're kind of in a different sort of program. We're going to kind of stress cooperation and stuff. He goes, God, these kids are so different from all the other kids. He goes, I had another group of, this is first and second graders that were the PE, and he goes, I had another group of first graders, and they got in I had to break up 4 fights during the stretching exercise. So they didn't even get to the games, and and he said, well, we try not to do a lot of competition stuff, and we try to do cooperation and stuff, and he goes, wow. And it made me feel good, like, because sometimes when you're in it and you're hoping it's working, but you know, when you have a first grader that's telling you, I did drawing centers. Oh God. And I realized too, he does drawing centers, and then, I mean, this is a kid who never used to like to draw, and then he goes on, he has these elaborate stories, and I think, well, that's sort of like language arts. If he can make this whole big old thing up about the dungeons and the ghosts, and this kind of goes this way, then fine.
He'll be reading soon. I wish I had $1 for every time a docent on a field trip said, this is the best behaved group of kids I ever had. And they're not well behaved because their teachers were well behaved. Best behaved group of kids I've ever had, and they ask the best questions. Because if kids are encouraged to ask the questions themselves, which we do here a lot of talking, questions are the power of learning. And people notice it all the time. These kids are both of those things. And if you don't exercise muscles, they don't work. And if you don't exercise that social muscle and that behavioral muscle, then it doesn't happen. So you get kids in the 5th and 6th grade who have always been controlled, and they lose it when they have an opportunity to blow. I mean, they go. When I was a substitute teacher, before my rookie year, I took a group of 6th graders to a play at the Chabot Auditorium, and they were all over the place. They were mean, rotten kids. And it's because they didn't know any better. It was their opportunity to screw up. And you can't measure that. You can't take a test for how Charquin does that. And I don't know how we could write an article about it to prove it, but it's true. It's one of the other choices. Thank you for making that statement. It sounds like you've got a linguistically adroit kid.
Same children, twin daughters and nominal 2-year-olds, 2nd graders rather. But when I collect them at night, I ask them all the time, what'd you learn in school today? And harmoniously they say, nothing.
We used to practice that. Honestly, we did. And you ask a stupid question and you get a stupid answer. You say, what did you do in school today? What's the easiest answer? I mean, kids are not interested in things. You've got to ask a question that they have to answer. You know, at least, did you go to the drawing center? And what did you draw? You know, or who did you sit with at lunch? You know, I mean, it's incumbent upon you. And we had an article that we sent out one time about that. That's one of the ways you can engage your child in linguistic banter that will help them grow. But I love that response. I just love that.
Yeah, I was going to say the opposite end of your experience in the PE room was that my junior high kid also saw it, but from the other end. He saw that when he first went to junior high, he came home and told me stories about how those other kids behaved, and he saw it as them being different than him. He went to a school that no other Charquin kids went to. So he just saw that, gee, those kids really talk back to the teacher, and they waste a lot of time, and they lose it a lot, and that gave me an opportunity to talk to him and say, see, I told you had it. You realize how good it was.
I think that a lot of that comes from respect. I don't think the system respects children. I really don't. And it's not that the traditional school teachers are bad people, and I know some really good ones, and they're great with their kids. But kids oftentimes are told to do things just because I told you so, and then that happens at home too. And the way they just get pushed around a lot. I would like to think that in Charquin that doesn't happen nearly as much, and that if you respect them, they respect you. I think a lot of kids in the 5th and 6th and 7th and 8th grade are out for their teachers. They're pissed off, and not just at your kids, they're pissed off at their environment too.
Charquin kids won't let you get away with just because I told you so. I know in our house, if we even try to use that as an answer, they just carry on much longer. They won't allow it.
I'm here to testify.
Hallelujah.
That's one of the things about, we've had these testimonials before, and it's real. The one person I missed, no offense, Sharon, love you, buddy, is Libby Barbaria. Used to always wait until the end of the meeting, and then she'd say something that we all know.
Well, I don't think I'm as profound as Libby, but you'll have to do.
Well, the pressure's on, Sharon.
Yes, I look at the clock goes around, but what I want to testify two very strong adults. People, I went in, Ian asked me to come sit in on a college class. He said, Mom, you won't believe how bad this teacher is. So I called up the teacher, who's a colleague of mine, and said, my son has invited me to your classroom. And she said, this is the first time any student I've ever had this kind of parents in the classroom.
You didn't tell her why.
And I went, and he was right, she was awful. And we were able to analyze specifically what she was doing that was so offensive. But I have another child who's a non-academic person, you remember, was a non-academic person from the beginning, but they're strong people. And then, at this tail end, I brought in this little person who'd been medically traumatized for the first 2 years of her life. And now she's getting so strong, she said to me at lunch today, because I told her, you need to make a decision about what you're eating and just eat it, don't play games with Mom, She goes, I hate you. that Charquin creates. I see that as a sign of strength. Charquin allows children to have such faith in themselves that they can stand up in a classroom in the outside world and say, this is what I believe. I feel strongly about this. I'm willing to discuss it with you. And here are my reasons for believing it.
Argument is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, when they were about 15, I wasn't sure I liked it.
Well, you can't argue unless you know what you stand for.
That's it. But that kind of faith in themselves is a result of the Charquin.
One of the things I like about what you said is that they know what bad teaching is. When kids go to junior high school, they'll come back and say, I got a great math teacher. And they know it. Or they come back and say, this teacher was really bad. But most kids just don't even think about it. It's like, it's the teacher. I mean, they might know it's bad, but these kids are able to articulate why. I like them. Maybe they'll all be editors or something.
He's writing and producing his own radio plays, in addition to carrying 24 units of it. And he never learned to multiply in Charquin.
Wasn't I only supposed to talk an hour?
So,
And don't you guys have a meeting?
I think we're close to Sharon.
So it'll probably go till when? Or anyway, Sharon.
I want to hear your explanation that you gave me 10 years ago on the kindergarten reading question. Because I had what I thought was an MSG, what we've always referred to as my son the geniuses. And I remember coming into you and saying, my MSG is reading. He's in kindergarten. Why isn't he in a reading group? And you said no. And you explained to me why.
Explain why? Well, kindergarten is a garden for kids to play in. It's what it started out as, and that's what it should be. And I think it's great if your kid reads in kindergarten, if that's what she does. It's not bad. And he can do that with you at home, or and he can read to his friends in the classroom and help out maybe in the cooking center or something by reading. But the chances are that the child needs a lot of play, too. One of the articles that is on the list that I've given to people with MSG kids before is MSG is my son the genius. And you can have
MDGs. We have MDGs.
is actually a lecture by Carl Jung, who's somebody that I really like. The first time I ever saw his name was because he was the guy that wrote in the I Ching. Back anyway, but he also had something to do with thinking and stuff. And he wrote this lecture called The Gifted Child. It's really good, if you're worried, read it. And it basically says that, we're talking about balance here. And if you've got a child that's really gifted in one area, chances are she could benefit from developing another area. Tracy Miller was one of the first kids at Charquin, and he never, 4th grade, he still wasn't doing any of the academic stuff. And I swear, if we were living on the plains with the Cheyenne, he'd be the #1 brave in that group. His talents just didn't, this much is out there, and school really sort of does this much for you. If you're not good at it, you're stuck. But let's honor the kids for what they do well, and it's great that Josh was reading at that, but there's so much more stuff to do, and Charquin can do it for me, where they could give it someplace else. I can do this for a long, long time, and I would be happy to field questions about the academic stuff. There's people in this program that can field those questions too. Anything else that you want to ask me along the lines of Charquin and so on? And I have, with my new job, I have more time. Well, not really, but one of the things I'm supposed to be doing is serving as a resource for people that are doing the real work, and that's you. And so if you have questions about curriculum and things that you want to challenge your kids with, if you got a first grader that does want to do columns of addition, I have some stuff that you could be doing, or I have stuff that you could do with the whole group. And it isn't bad. I don't mean to imply that you're killing your children. There are a lot of ways that I would still like to help, and if you'd like to have me come back and talk about reading specifically or